Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another Mosher's Mailbag. It's been over a week since I've done one, and I usually do one on Fridays, but I decided to do one in kind of the middle of the week here. I had a few questions from last week and then some lingering from my last mailbag that I couldn't get to, so I thought, hey, now would be a very good time to do a mailbag. So before I start, just let's recap everything that's gone on recently with the Eagles. Mini camp is over. It ended last week. So we are now in that kind of 6 week dead period before the start of training camp, which will be the third or fourth week of July. This is the kind of time where the front office people and the coaches pray that they don't get that call in the middle of the night that something happened with one of the players. And all they want over the next 6 weeks is for their players to stay out of the police blotter, out of any league policy as far as steroid or anything blotter. Just have a good 6 weeks and not have to worry about anything else. And so hopefully that will be the case. I think with the Eagles, obviously a lot of guys that were not able to participate in the spring camps because of injuries, and that gave young guys a chance, like the J.J. Arcega-Whitesides and some of the rookies, Avante Maddox, second-year guy, a chance to get a lot of good reps and keep building. It gave, Big V a chance to practice at right guard with Brandon Brooks out. But it'll be very interesting to me when training camp starts to see these guys get back to practice. I think Jalen Mills will be a guy who gets back to practice, and we'll see where Ronald Darby is at with his ACL. We'll see where Nigel Bradham is at. Obviously, linebacker is a spot where a lot of young guys and backups got a chance to get a lot of reps during the mini camps because Nigel Bradham was out. So we'll see, when Zach Brown shows up. I mean, it's going to be the one thing about the Eagles that you can say, and I think we'll probably get to this in some of the questions, is that they've acquired a lot of bodies at almost every position. There is going to be legitimate competition for spots at training camp. And normally with the Eagles and with other NFL teams, when you get to training camp, you've got about, 48 or 49 of your 53-man roster pretty much decided. There's always the battle for the fifth wide receiver or the last running back or maybe a linebacker or two for special teams. But this year, there's going to be good competition at a lot of really important spots. So I look forward to that. But obviously, we have a few 5-6 weeks of summer here to relax before all that gets started. Second thing that's really important, if you're a listener, and I hope you are, to my Inside the Birds subscribe, we are now standing alone. For the moment, we're still aligned with WIP and the Go Birds platform, but we've also moved on our own. So if you go to Apple Podcasts and do a search on Inside the Birds, you can get our podcast as a standalone, and I urge you to please subscribe to it. So it's in about a month or two, it's not going to be part of Go Birds, where if you're already a subscriber to the Go Birds podcast, you normally get Inside the Birds with it. Now you need to be a subscriber to Inside the Birds podcast for you to be able to get the great content that Adam and I have been giving you almost a year now, since last August. So please, and I'll continue to put it on the Patreon site, please listen to the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam and I have really good chemistry. I think we give really good intel. It's not like a lot of other podcasts out there. I think we really do a good job, if I can say so, of kind of telling you everything about the organization, what it's thinking, why moves were made. We spent a lot of time on our last podcast talking about the front office moves that were made. I've written about it. I've talked about it. I thought it was very important after Joe Douglas left that Howie Roseman rewarded Andy Weidel and promoted several scouts, not just Andy, but Ian Cunningham and several scouts that Joe Douglas brought in, because what he's doing is preserving that scouting tradition and culture that Joe Douglas brought here for the last 3 years, that Joe himself learned while growing up in the Baltimore Ravens chain, which is one of the best personnel and evaluation chains in football. So that mentality, that culture, the communication between the scouts and the coaches and what they're looking for and how to go get them what they need all stays the same, because you have the same thought process and grading system and culture and mentality at the top, with now Andy Weidel taking the place of Joe Douglas. And Weidel signed an extension. You don't have to worry about everybody running off to go be with Joe Douglas and the Jets. So that was a really good move by Howie Roseman. And it should, and nothing's given, nothing's concrete, but it should put the Eagles in good hands going forward. Okay, let's get to some of the questions. Frank G, I feel like Frank G's my leadoff hitter. He's always got questions for me. And it's funny. I get this a lot. I guess as a journalist, I've kind of removed myself a little bit from I guess, the emotion or the hype and the hysteria that goes into comparing one guy versus another. But I know that. Listen, you don't have to tell me how passionate the Eagles Cowboys rivalry is, and how easy it is to get into fights with those Cowboys fans and or national media who may prefer one or the other. So Frank asks, why do national media say that Dak Prescott is better than Wentz? And I don't want to sound dismissive. I don't see a whole lot of the national media that says that. I don't consider, say, Skip Bayless, who is a Cowboys fan basically and a little bit of a talking head. I don't consider his opinion on Cowboys or Dak to be representative of the quote unquote national media. I think there are a lot of people in the national media that really value Carson Wentz and that believe he's an excellent quarterback. Lou Riddick, good example. Here's a guy who used to work for the Eagles, works for ESPN, one of their best NFL analysts. And, although he worked for the Eagles, Lou and Howie, kind of had their issues going back to the past when they worked together. So it's not like he is a yes man for all the moves that Howie Roseman or the Eagles make. He's a former Eagles employee. So he has said many times this spring and summer that he thinks Carson Wentz is going to come back and win MVP. He's a big Carson Wentz fan. So, for everybody who likes Dak, there may be just as many people who like Carson. They're different to me. If I were to compare the two, I think that Dak reminds me of Alex Smith. And I don't mean that in an uncomplimentary way. I mean, because I've always felt that Alex Smith is a pretty good quarterback, although I've acknowledged that he's good to a point. I don't think he can lift your franchise by himself and win a Super Bowl. But if you surrounded him with enough really good players, you could go pretty far. And the thing with Dak is he's young. So how I think they're similar is I think they're very accurate across the middle. I think they have good mobility. And the one thing that stands out about both of them to me is that I don't think that they look to drive the ball down the field as much. They play it safe and they rely on their accuracy between 10, 15 yards to move the chains somewhat horizontally instead of north-south vertically. And it has worked. Dak has a great running back, great offensive line, and I think his wide receiver weapons are pretty good ever since they got Amari Cooper. I think Michael Gallup was a pretty good player as a rookie. We'll see with Jason Witten when he comes back. But Dak has been able to step into this league and be a successful quarterback for the 3 years. So I take nothing away from Dak. And now, when his offensive line got beat up 2 years ago, it took a toll on him. And again, I think his inability to drive the ball and to stretch a defense is his flaw. But that doesn't make him a bad quarterback. It just means he's got flaws. You look at Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz can do a little bit more. He throws an accurate ball. I think he looks to drive the ball deep. That is something that 2 years ago he did as well as any quarterback in the league. I think Carson is even more gifted of a runner than Dak athletically in the open field, and he takes more chances. So I think Carson Wentz is a higher ceiling. I think when they're both playing very good, they're both really good quarterbacks. I do think Carson Wentz, his size, his athleticism, the way he commands the offense, and the way he can escape breakdowns in the pocket, especially when he doesn't have a broken back, is better overall than Dak. So I do think Carson has more of the ability to lift a franchise. But, I go back to Dak's rookie year. They lost the game to Green Bay, I think, in the NFC divisional round. But Dak threw for 336 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception, over 100 passer rating as a rookie. So that was very impressive. And I think that the Eagles-Cowboys games are going to be pretty good games. I think the Cowboys are pretty formidable on paper. I think the Eagles are really formidable on paper, and that's probably going to be your top 2 teams in the NFC East. If you had to put a gun to my head, I would say Carson Wentz is the better quarterback. I think he just has more good physical characteristics. And again, I think he drives the ball more. I think he puts the ball through tighter windows down the field more, although he can improve on that. And certainly going on last year, Carson Wentz can hit the check down a little bit more. Dak has no problem hitting that running back or that slot receiver for 5 yards. Carson wants to drive the ball sometimes so badly that he's going to ignore that guy. That's an area of Carson's game that I think he needs to sharpen up. But to go back to the original point Frank made, I don't know that I see a lot of national pundits declaring Dak to be better than Carson unilaterally. Frank also asks, what does my overall feel about the Eagles compared to Dallas? When I just kind of talked about that a little bit, and that I think those are two cream of the crop teams. I think that when they're at their, I think the Eagles are a little bit better on paper right now. I love their what they've done at wide receiver. Clearly, the Cowboys have a great running back that the Eagles just don't have in Ezekiel Elliott. I think offensive lines are both very good. I think defensive lines are both very good. Linebackers, I think you have to give Cowboys the edge. They have great linebackers compared to the Eagles. Secondary, that's going to be the swing. We'll see how the Eagles secondary plays with Ronald Darby, with Avonte Maddox stepping up, and with Jalen Mills coming back from the foot injury. Obviously, Rodney McLeod healthy at safety. Um, that's where I think the Cowboys can be better if the Eagles aren't playing well, or the Eagles be better if the Cowboys aren't getting great safety production. But to me, it looks like two even teams, and may the better quarterback win, Frank. So, and I know how you feel about who the better quarterback is. Next question comes from Chris. Do the Eagles have the best skill set in the NFL? That's an interesting one. Well, I just talked about the Cowboys. I think the Eagles have a better overall set of wide receiver and tight end weapons than the Cowboys, even though the Cowboys have the better running back. Trying to think of some other. I mean, obviously the Rams. If Todd Gurley winds up becoming healthy, and Brandon Cooks, and all the way, and if Cooper Kupp comes back healthy, Higsby, their tight end, is very good. They have an excellent set of weapons there. So that's a team that you look at and you say they can score a lot. Obviously, Kansas City Chiefs, we'll have to see what happens with Tyreek Hill. But whenever you're putting Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, and Pat Mahomes as the trigger man, that's going to be pretty tough to beat too. Hill's speed is just, Hill's got more speed than anybody on the Eagles. Travis Kelce is the best tight end in football. And Sammy Watkins is a really good number three option. So, yeah, they took a little bit of a hit, obviously, when they had to get rid of Kareem Hunt. But if Tyreek Hill manages to play this year, I think you got to put the Chiefs and the Rams up there with the Eagles, too, as having the best skill set in football. The Eagles are almost a strength in numbers. They may not have someone as prolific as Travis Kelce. I think Zach Ertz is obviously a very good tight end. Kelce a little bit more prolific. Alshon Jeffrey, a good wide receiver. Amari Cooper, though, a little bit more prolific. But from top to bottom, when you talk about Alshon, Deshaun, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, who everybody knows I'm a huge fan of. I think he's a really good player. Nelson Aguilar in the slot. From top to bottom, that is an excellent set of weapons. And they're, obviously have very good running backs too. I think they have a chance to have good running backs. Jordan Howard can move the chains. I expect Corey Clement to come back better, but he's a big question mark right now. And Miles Sanders hasn't taken a snap since rookie camp and missed all the ensuing camps after that. So I have no idea what to expect from Miles Sanders. So I would put the Eagles in the top 5 for skill position, but there's a couple of question marks there. And it almost seems to be more strength in numbers than any one single individual. I think by themselves, they don't have the top 1, 2, or 3 player at a specific position. Maybe Ertz a tight end, although you make the argument that Travis Kelce and George Kittle might be 1 and 2. Both of those guys set records for tight ends in receiving interceptions last year as well. So that's my roundabout way of saying Eagles definitely have a very good skill position group. Could be top 5, but there are some other groups out there that can definitely give them a run for the money. Chris also asked, and this is a really interesting question. I can't say I've thought about it a lot. Here's what I can't say. I can't say I've researched enough, but I've definitely put a lot of thought about it. And he asked me on my thoughts on the Redskins name and if it should change, if it's a slur, or how I feel about that. I would say that there is a part of it that makes me uncomfortable. From my limited research, it sounds like Redskin was a slur, and it is a slur. So in my opinion, I would support any movement by the organization to change the name. I think that the owner stubbornly is clinging to some kind of tradition, but we've seen teams that are steeped in tradition changed their names before. The Syracuse Orange Men is what they were called, and that was kind of named after an Indian tribe, I believe, or a slur for Indians in New York, perhaps. But they just cut off the men and made it the Syracuse Orange, and their mascot's a big orange. And there isn't there aren't too many college basketball programs with the type of history that Syracuse has, going back to its time in the Big East, and obviously Jim Boeheim and Derek Coleman, Billy Owens, Lawrence Moten. I mean, it's been a powerhouse for forever. St. John's, another basketball powerhouse going back to the days of Louis Carnesecca, right, and Chris Mullin. They used to be the St. John's Redmen. They changed their names. I believe they are the Red Storm now. There have been a lot of teams that have ditched Indian monikers and went with different names, and it didn't change anything about them other than they no longer had an Indian name and no longer had an Indian slur as a mascot name. So if Washington did that, I would support it. When I try to call in writing when I'm writing. I usually just say Washington, and then sometimes it just say Skins. Like I'll say the Skins converted a first down, or he plays for the Skins, because I feel like now I'm not using the slur. I'm just calling them the Skins. Skins can be anything. So that's my viewpoint on it. It would be nice to see it change, and we kind of, as a society, get away from naming teams after Indian cultures or any cultures. But we'll see if that happens in the future. And the last question he asked me is, one move I would make as Eagles general manager. What would be the one move I made as Eagles? The Eagles have made so many moves that it's hard for me to say what one move I make. I tell you this, I'm not 100% sure I would have traded Michael Bennett to the Patriots this offseason. So if I could redo a move, it might be keeping Michael Bennett. I get it. I know why they did it. They felt like maybe there were too many issues in the locker room, not as respected among other veterans, and maybe they felt he was a ticking time bomb. But if he's good enough to play for the New England Patriots, then I don't see why he's not good enough to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, especially coming off the season that he had last year. I thought he had a really good season. I understand culture is important, locker room is important. The Eagles have taken guys in mainly for a year, when they had questionable behavior or transgressions in the past, they've made it work. But I just thought that giving Michael Bennett away for a fifth-round pick coming off the year he had, that's a little dicey when you're trying to win a Super Bowl. I also understand that the team has felt like it needs to get younger, and you can only bring back so many guys who are over the age of 30. But Bennett was very productive last year, and he didn't show any signs of slippage. It's one of those moves that I've said I feel like the Eagles have gotten a little bit of a free pass, and maybe they deserve it for finally winning a Super Bowl 2 years ago and making it back to the playoffs. But things that would ordinarily bother fans don't seem to bother them as much now. We'll see what happens, in October and November when the team doesn't have, loses a game and they have no pass rush. People are going to, throw Howie under the bus and wonder. But for now, it surprised me how many people supported move to trade a player as productive as Michael Bennett was and basically get a fifth-round pick. But so maybe if that was one move I would make, it would be the one move I wouldn't make as the GM. I'll try to think about that for the next mailbag too. Maybe another move that I would make, like a trade. I'm trying to think if there's anybody out there. I mean, we could play fantasy football all day, and I can propose a trade here or there. But the Eagles, like I said, are pretty deep at a lot of different positions. So I think Howie and Joe did a great job of restacking and reshaping this roster, and we'll see. All right, that's going to do it for Mosher's Mailbag. Thank you for watching, and remember, submit your questions to me as soon as you get them. Everybody should be like Frank G. Frank G just sends me questions throughout the week, and I kind of collaborate them and answer them whenever I do these mailbags. So if you have a question, if it's on your mind, just message me through Patreon. Don't wait for me to send out the question myself. All right, everybody have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.